Okay, welcome everyone. I'm going to call the meeting to order, that being the special council meeting of Warwick Township Council, December 16th, 2024, and we're starting today at 2:30. I'd also ask council to abide by the disclosure of pecuniary interest or conflict of interest rules. Does anybody have a conflict of interest at this time? Seeing none. Also like to welcome everybody who's joining us through YouTube today. And now I'm going to do the acknowledgement of ancestral lands. We acknowledge that the Township of Warwick is located on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, as well as the many Indigenous nations in Ontario, whose footsteps have marked them for centuries. We also wish to acknowledge that we are situated on Treaty 29 and Treaty 25 territories signed by Chippewa chiefs and offer our respect and gratitude for these lands. Council, I'm going to take you to number 5 on the agenda. And I know we've had a lot of meetings in the last little while, but did anybody have any changes on the councillor commitment dates that they want to share now? Okay, as always, if you have something, you can always let the clerk know. Councilors' items and verbal reports. Jerry, did you have anything today, Mr. Councilor Westgate?
There was one thing, asked Ryan, the lines in the arena, they say they're not very bright anymore. Is the ice getting too thick or what's going on there? I just had a couple complaints about that today, about the lines not showing up very good.
Right, thank you to Councillor Westgate. It's something I could certainly look into. It's my understanding the ice is at the depth it needs to be for adequate ice. It may just be the lines, wearing away over time, but it's something we can look at. And if there's a way to do a refresher of the line painting, we can certainly look into that.
We're not still using the stencils underneath the ice and put it on before the ice goes in?
To you, Councillor Westgate, yes, we use stencils for the logos. The lines, some of the lines are in fact paint.
Okay, anything else, Councilor Westgate?
That's everything I had.
Thank you, sir. Councilor Morris, did you have anything for today?
I have nothing today, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Manning.
Nothing today, thank you.
All right, thank you. I just have a few things here. First off, on behalf of Township Council, I'd like to congratulate the East Lambton U13 hockey team for winning the Watford Silver Stick. Congratulations to all. I'd also like to point out that I had the opportunity to give Scott Dagg a Mayor Award for 30 years of assisting scouting in our community, and also Ann Jenkins for 48 years of service to the Girl Guides in our community. So I had the pleasure of presenting those awards to them last week. And we can't say thank you enough for folks like them that continue to put public service ahead of some of their own things that they're trying to do with their own lives. They just put their time out there for others to appreciate. So I wanted to congratulate both of them as well. Also, just one other thing, we talk about the arena. I did have a ratepayer ask about parking in the lines, not in the big parking lots around the arena and the complex, but along the roadside area of it. And maybe I'll just ask you, Ryan, I guess it's getting to the point where they're getting a little dull as well. So maybe, do you have a comment on that?
Thank you, Mayor Case, to council. That's something that I have actually noticed as well. The lines are fading. It can certainly be, we can add that to our work plan in the spring and refresh those lines, specifically along Centennial Ave.
All right, thank you very much, Ryan. Appreciate that. Okay, council, I'm going to take you and everybody to number 6 on our agenda, and it's delegations and timed events. Today we have Mike DeVos, who's a professional engineer from Spreets and Associates, and he's going to present a report on infrastructure in the Township of Warwick. Before we get going, I just want to let the public know there will be an opportunity for public comment and consultation at a special Public Works meeting early in the new year. We also remind everybody that you can reach out at any time to our township staff to discuss any municipal items, including drainage and infrastructure. So Mike, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you for being here, and I'll let you give your report. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go over it fairly briefly. Council does have a written copy, and I've assumed that you've read through it. I will open it up to questions and clarification. If you want me to go more into depth, just stop me at any point and let me know to do that, and I can. But to keep the time as short as we can, I will go over briefly. This report is what we refer to as a preliminary hydrology report. So it's more so finding out what the flows are, what some of the pinch points or issues that maybe people are experiencing. There has been concern raised in the north side of Watford, mostly in the area in the east part of town, but in the past and the west part of town has also experienced flooding concerns. It's all on the same area that's tributary to the Brown Chariot drain. So the flow is generally from east to west. The highest ground is near the community center, and the land slopes to the west as it goes out of town. And by the time it gets to the west side of town, instead of being a piped infrastructure, it's an open channel. But we focused on the particular area west of Nauvoo in the upper part, closer to the community center. There was also an issue raised on McGregor Street, and even in the area where the water wants to flow from Centennial at the community center down through onto McGregor. So that particular area was focused on. We have and are continuing to look at other things downstream, and it just wasn't the main focus of this, but we do plan on looking at the other areas as well. The area that in question was actually looked at as part of a study that we did a few years ago for the whole town of Watford in terms of the storm infrastructure. There were areas that were identified as being deficient in its design in terms of today's design standards. We do note that in the more recent past, the municipality has increased the design standards for storm sewers. So it has changed from a 2-year design standard to a 5-year, and those numbers are typically referred to as how often the rain event returns. This particular area has experienced 2 significantly large rain events over the past 2 years, being 2023 and 2024. Those rain events are significantly larger than what the design standards would be for a typical pipe system. And at that point, any excess flow has to either find a place to pond or flow over land to get to an outlet. That outlet could be the Brown Chariot drain, or it could be other areas if you're in different parts of the town. But in August of 2023, there was a fairly large storm in one event that had upwards of close to 8 inches of rain. That's quite a lot of rain. That particular rain event was a little bit longer in duration than what some of the typical design storms. When we are provided design information on how we calculate the size of these systems, you're using a particular length of storm with a peak. So they refer to as intensity of rain, so how quickly the rain is falling. So typically you'll see a rain event that's fairly short with a very high peak. This particular storm may not have had the peaks as high in terms of the intensities, but the duration was long enough that the volumes just overweighed everything that was available. And one caution that I would provide, and I've provided it to other clients too, is that any standards that are out there that we will design to may be an improvement over what you have and will be an improvement over what you have. But if you get a rain event that size, that you will still see flooding and you will still see the need for overland flows to happen. But considering that and considering what the concerns were raised, we did try to, and we had discussions with staff as to what we might look at as some of these potential solutions. And a few of them actually try to address some of those bigger rain events. So there are ways of doing it. So some of the solutions will address them more than others, but there are ways of trying to address the larger storms as well. The other rain event was a rain event that was spanned more over 2 days or a little more than 2 days. What happens in those is that the peaks again may not necessarily be really high, but the ground becomes saturated. The areas that fill up with water are already full. So when that second wave of water comes, there's just not the capacity there for those areas to absorb some of that water, and then you see that the flooding get worse. So some of those storms are a little bit different than what you would experience, say, in a 3-inch thunderstorm, real quick rain event. But we did use those types of storms in some of in the analysis when we started looking at what some of the solutions would be. We looked at the conditions that are there. We ended up using both calculations as well as modeling, computer modeling. So we looked at the two different ways of trying to come up with the flows. And comparing that, we did check against the stormwater management system that was in place at the community center, and the results were quite similar. So we ruled that out as a potential issue of what's happening. There are large areas there in this particular area that are unrestricted, so that when you have areas of asphalt road, roof, driveways, the water just flows and it goes. If the rain event gets bigger, the amount of water gets bigger. So we've had to look at what might be done. In our study of the town, one of the projects that we identified and recommended was to make improvements to McGregor Street storm sewer. So we found that the storm sewer along McGregor heading upstream of Nauvoo was undersized to what it would be if we were to design something new. So that actually had some recommendations, including dollar numbers attached to it in that report. That was looked at. Making those sort of improvements would be what you would typically look at as an improvement as a town. That's what you would typically do. Having some of the concerns that have been raised, particularly in this area, and some of the concerns being more so with some of the larger rain events, that type of improvement to the storm sewer system won't necessarily tackle the big rain events. So that's why we looked at what other ways could you do, things could you do to make improvements. Some of the other solutions actually would take some of the bigger rain events, whereas that type of improvement, it would address the smaller rain events, and it would make an improvement in the big rain events, but just not the same amount. You're not trying to tackle that. That's not the main purpose of them. So that is definitely alternative, is pursue that type of improvement. Another alternative, what we call alternative number 2, would be to try to implement stormwater management in that upper area, so that you're going to capture water, store it, and release it slowly so that it doesn't overload the system downstream, and it doesn't have the same amount of surface flow and flooding in the area that has the concern. That requires space to physically build things to hold water. The municipality has an area within the running track behind the community center that was discussed and looked at as a potential place to be able to do something. You could potentially maybe use some of the parking lot area on the north end of the building. Also, there is Memorial Park. Some of the initial discussions were that physically manipulating Memorial Park would be somewhat difficult due to some of the tree plantings there that have dedications to them and things like that. So we tried to avoid grading and removing trees to be able to do that type of work. But it is certainly a method of trying to reduce the flooding. And then as well, one thing you could do is provide some berming or guidance to the water as it at some point in time, some of that water wants to flow downstream through Memorial Park to McGregor Street. So putting in some grading and berms in there, and not necessarily digging swales or things like that, is another way of doing it. And you can build those stormwater management systems to a higher storm to help out those bigger rain events. A third alternative was looked at, in that if you could get the water away from that area entirely, that would remove water both from the area that's being flooded, McGregor Street downstream, but even west of Nauvoo downstream through Bork's grocery store and through the channel before you get to John Street and to Sunset. That whole stretch of area you'd be removing water from. So you're getting a bigger effect by spending money, by try to say, okay, let's take water away if we can get it going in a different direction. One possible way is that in the study that was done a few years ago, it was identified that a new storm sewer should be built from the Brown Area drain at the Confederation Road crossing, due east along Confederation to the intersection of Nauvoo. You could then decide to increase the capacity of that pipe and keep going, extend it with a new pipe along Confed over to Centennial and then head south to this particular area at the top end. That would divert water away from that system. And again, you could tackle rain events bigger than what the typical storm sewer would be. That would require the other project. And as well, maybe just a comment is the lower piece of that recommended sewer west of Nauvoo, a piece of that was being looked at as being constructed by a developer for the servicing for water coming out of that subdivision, residential subdivision down to that spot. So again, it was making that piece bigger to serve a bigger area. So there was work that was contemplated. So again, you're paying for pipe size. You're not having to then pay towards more asphalt restoration or supporting hydro poles. There's all types of works that when you have to dig down so deep to put a pipe in anyway. Well, if you're going to put a little bit of a bigger pipe in, it's more cost efficient. So some of that stuff is part of the reason why we've identified that particular solution. One solution that we didn't include that is a potential solution, and we've actually gone through some numbers since the submission of this report. I know that council has budget considerations to make this time of year. And I know that it was written in our report that that's a factor for the municipality to consider. We've gone ahead and tried to give you guys an idea of what that looks like, what these alternatives look like. It's a preliminary, but in part of that, basically a fourth alternative could be to try and take that upper region east instead of going west with it. One of the concerns with that is that you are pushing water into a different channel, a different downstream receiving water course. And typically, that would have to be approved by the Conservation Authority. Their mandate is flooding and erosion. And their concern will be that we're increasing more water to a different water course. It is a fairly large water course, so the percentage impact might be relatively small. And if that's something that the municipality wishes to have further investigated and try to pursue, by all means, it's something that you could. We've tried to get a handle on what that might look like financially if you went that way. And if you wish, we can add it into this report. We were working as diligently as we can to try and get these reports to you and as quickly as possible. And we're doing our best to get that to you. The other thing that's not included in this report is the Brown Area open channel. And are there things that can be done to that channel that would help the performance of the system in the area? Now, I don't think it's going to necessarily help the people right at the very top up near the community center, but it might help the people a bit further down, say west of Nauvoo. So that's something that we need to consider and look at. It just wasn't focused on as part of this. So the other alternative of heading east would have basically a storm sewer heading south on Centennial instead of north. You would go south and then try to take the drain east, probably right around the boundary between the community center property and the school property. There is a water main and also a drain that comes from the water tower. And there's also another drain that drains the schoolyard. So there's some space in there where you would probably want to be on the school property and replace the old school drain. If you tried to go on the old drain that's coming from the water tower, then you'd be pretty much close to or underneath a row of fencing and also 2 hydro poles. So you can try to fit it where you want, but ultimately you can probably put it in the least impacting spot. So that's, if you go further north, you're in the parking lot. And then if you're that far north, you're going through the tower though. So then you're gonna have to, once you get to that point, you're gonna have to jog around the tower. So going just to the south, you can replace an older drain that's already there and functioning and go straight past that. Once you get to the ball diamond, you would jog south and then continue east and then almost cut down on an angle. You wouldn't necessarily follow the route of the Grogan drain, which is more easterly. You can get a much shorter distance if you go southeasterly and get into it. There's a water course down that way, and we can provide information on that, but it's about 900 meters from the ball diamond to the point of that turn, that jog, about 900 meters from there to the outlet. That could be constructed using more agricultural style pipe. And agricultural pipe don't have sealed joints on them. Their jointing system is different. The method of installation can be more economical. So there is some cost savings in the installation and the materials, but you are going a fairly big distance. You would have to provide compensation to landowners for access. You're crossing private property. You would probably have to have a drainage report under the Drainage Act for that. So there's different things, and we've tried to include as much as we could in some of that information to you for that. But again, that's basically 4 options for that upper area. There was another area localized near McGregor and Nauvoo on the north side, let's say the northeast corner of that intersection. There's some houses back in there that have a fairly low-lying area. And in the big rain event, there's water that's not getting out of the rear yards. There appears to be somewhat of a swale heading west out to Nauvoo. If the water would get high enough, it would pour west. You could investigate that. We haven't done any of the investigation yet, but you should probably investigate that particular overland flow route, as well as there's documentation that shows 2 different pipes that would tie into the storm system from that area. There's a smaller pipe heading south that was part of the subdivision when it was constructed that takes the water out to the storm sewer on McGregor. And there's also an older pipe that would go west out to Nauvoo. I think that's larger, that would head out and connect into that. That was there before the subdivision. Whether there's any blockages in it or they're not working properly might be part of the problem. You don't know, but you could investigate that. The rain events were large enough that water may have been building up to try and find a way over Nauvoo going west. And Nauvoo is elevated a bit to the point where if it's high enough, it might be causing a problem back there. And there was just too much water to try and let the pipes use it. So it has to fill up and go over Nauvoo to continue downstream. So we could figure some of those things out and be able to make recommendations, but it has been identified and we know where it is. We know what the infrastructure is around there. Having a video inspection of those pipes would be helpful. Maybe the old pipes have roots that have got into them. If there's something like that you find, then the solution gets a little more easy, I think, to try to deal with it. It may not be the ultimate solution in some of the big rain events, but we've already cautioned everybody on some of those rain events. One of the other things that the alternatives, when you're looking at constructing stormwater management, from a cost point of view, and also we had discussions with the municipality of looking at potential phasing or things that could be done in the short term versus the long term. We know that the costs are quite large, and what can you do and how can you make recommendations to try and pick the low hanging fruit or phase it to say, okay, here's what we could do in the first year or the second year or the third year, whatever it might be. And unfortunately, with all the problems or some of the work that's being done, being in the upper reaches and having to get to an outlet, it's not that easy to find. But one thing that we did note was that by trying to implement either curb and gutter along the west side of Centennial or implementing a small portion of stormwater management along the east part of the park where there's no trees. One thing you could do is with the new parking lot for the community center is possibly eliminate some of the parking on the west side of Centennial, because there's parking on the west side. That asphalt is quite wide and there's a lot of asphalt there. So if you could remove the asphalt on the west side, the extension for the parking, and then use just a little bit of that grassed area before the trees start, you might be able to construct some dry storage area so that in the big rain events, you're gonna hold some of that water in that particular area, let the storm sewer that goes through the park catch up and empty it without the water flooding downstream. That would allow you to phase it. And so and it would also save cost because you're not digging very deep. It's not a very deep system. It's a very shallow system. So compared to trying to dig a storage area inside the track, which you'd still have to do, but you could be a little more cost efficient by doing it in the park, a little bit in the park, with still doing a bit of shallower inside the track area. And that would also allow you to phase it. That's something that could be tackled relatively quickly and be done first, sort of thing. And then you could look at making more improvements by doing more in the track at a later date. That was really, George, I think one of the only things that we could find from we might have had a few notes on other things.
Yeah, I guess one thing we did talk about was just potentially adding a little bit more height to the stormwater management there on the parking lot for, you know, if you have 8 inches of rain, it handles 5 inches of rain in a really quick duration really well, but if you get 8 inches of rain, there potentially could be a little bit of outflow from there, so.
Yeah, you could adjust where the entrance to the community center is close to the doors. There's a paved area where it comes into the parking lot and you go up and then you go down into the parking lot. If you raise that little ramp as you go up over the sidewalk in that area, if you raise that we're only talking 1.5 inches, 2 inches, that 1.5 inches or 2 inches makes a bigger difference over the whole parking lot. And you could store some extra water in that parking lot by just raising that entrance a little bit. That's a low-lying fruit type thing that could be added.
I'm just changing the orifice.
Yes, yeah, that was in the report.
Just changing the orifice would slow the water down by quite a bit. And if you added 6 more inches in the deepest part of the parking lot, would add a lot of rainwater retention, and it would be a very easy fix.
One thing about making the orifice smaller that I caution people on is it's great in the medium-sized rain events, but where that parking lot is full and pushing with the bigger orifice, that will happen sooner. The parking lot's going to fill up faster, which means say these rain events were quite large, like we're talking 8 inches. And when you get the 4-inch rains, this thing might be full and overflowing a little bit at the 4-inch rain rather than the 6-inch rain if we make the orifice smaller. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying beware, be cautious, and understand it's a bit of give and take.
And so the solution might be to raise that up a little bit and restrict the orifice a little
Could
bit
do
in
both.
combination,
Yeah,
right? So-
our recommendation would be to consider both. If you're looking for some early, faster process type work, that might be something that you could add to it.
Unfortunately, that is only a small portion of the contributing watershed as a whole, so.
Yeah, there's a lot of water that does not get into that parking lot that is creating more water that's causing the flooding that you have to try to address.
But it does help one piece.
But some in the public have been saying that since we built the new hall there, it's worse. It's got to be a lot better because we've got better water retention on the parking lot, on the roof, where we didn't have it before. All we had was Sabaldime in there before, and the water was going directly into our drains quickly. I think we've improved it a lot. It's just the huge rain events. It's not what we've done there. I think what we've done has helped a lot.
Yeah, the idea of what was done at the community center was to make sure that they had the same or more storage, like the the old ball diamond in there south of the old building did hold water, and it did stormwater management naturally. That was the lay of the land. The road was higher and it would hold it. And the new system is there to function the same or better, but because you have more roof area, you have to be cautious, making sure some of that new water is not getting out. So the idea is that it's not necessarily better or worse. It's similar is the idea. But these rain events are large. They were longer too. The duration of them is not something that you typically see. They will occur. Yeah, I've worked on a few projects in the area and some of the landowners have reported to us that, say for instance, we have a project along Sexton near the town line. That particular area received a lot of water in that same rain event. And they said they hadn't seen that type of rain since the mid-1980s, when there was a very large rain event that occurred similar to that. And that was the last time that the 402 had flooded in that particular area. And it happened again. That was the next time. It hadn't flooded since the mid-1980s, and it flooded again in 2023. Yeah, I at this point, I think I would open up to questions or clarification.
Okay, well, thank you, Mike. Anybody have any questions for Mike? Yeah, Counselor Morse.
Mike, just, I'm looking at option 3. And what does MTE stand for?
Or Mike here, MTE is more than engineering. They're a consultant that was hired on behalf of Hollingsworth. So Hollingsworth had designed a storm sewer along Confederation line.
Okay,
And their consultant was MTE. So that's what that reference would be
Okay.
referring to.
and the other quick question I had, the Brown Jarrett drain, I'm not too sure which, is that the one by Joe Roundboats' place? Okay, so I got the right drain. They cleaned that out. And during the August storm, I drove by there and that creek was running as most it could possibly handle. I guess my concern is go ahead and spend all this money and get the water from the north end over. Where's it gonna go? Is it gonna back up because it can't get out?
Yes, I agree that the whole system needs to be considered. The better drainage or the more water you try to push downstream is going to make those systems need to perform as well. And again, I've cautioned that these two rain events were bigger than anything that we could typically afford to build to design for. That doesn't mean that you don't try to make improvements and make things better. But this drain, that particular open channel, there's been discussion of at least investigating it, analyzing it to see what level of storm it could handle. Are there improvements that maybe we should be considering to make as a municipality? Should we be making some? And if so, how far downstream do you go, right? Like when these channels are going downhill, it will get to a point where you could have all kinds of water. You could have 5 feet of water above the ground or over your road, and it's not going to affect what's on the top of the hill. At some point, you could be able to stop, but you still need to consider the landowners who own those. Like, say, you referred to the Joe Rombouts farm. Well, you want to talk to the Joe Rombouts farm and say, what do you want? Or like, at some point though, the one thing that I would caution the municipality is that the municipality making improvements for their own sake versus making improvements for landowners who are experiencing flooding issues on their own. At some point, there's going to be financial, typically under the Drainage Act, and that Brown Jarrett is a municipal drain. Those landowners would contribute financially to improvements because you're improving their land for their use. It may not be 100% one way or 100% the other way, but you're going to have to find that line of how far does the municipality feel it's necessary to go totally at their own cost. I still think it's worth the effort to go through and analyze it. These open channels are dug for depth. So you're there to provide an outlet. The depth of it is there to say, okay, I have a tile under the field. I need my tile to be 3 or 4 feet deep. And then I want a foot from the tile down to the bottom of the ditch so the ditch can have some water in it. and then it just has capacity based on a trapezoid. The typical design standard recommended for municipal open channels is a 2-year storm. So quite similar to what a storm sewer would be. And on most projects, let's say we were 3 kilometers, 4 kilometers away from Watford, and we were asked to look at a open channel on a municipal drain. The 2-year storm standard would be typical for a road. In a rural area, roads can get built up. So a road, if it's a gravel road and it's not a major arterial road, you're looking at about a 1 in 10-year rain event. And if it's more of an arterial road, you might be a 1 in 25 rain event. So you can look at that, and if we find that channel, if the Brown Chariot isn't large enough, or that you think it should be larger, you could pursue that. And I think that investigation and that information is critical for you. Again, we're working as fast as we can to get this information to you, and I think we've provided some of that information to you on how to proceed. I would recommend that we do go forward with that. We have been looking. I don't think that you're gonna have to necessarily go all the way down to the Sydenham rivers. That, you're not talking, there's enough fall. This particular channel does fall at a relatively decent rate compared to others. We're not, like, once you get into the western part of your municipality, much flatter. This area drops faster, so you might not have to go too far downstream to do it, but you might want to do those improvements closer to Watford.
Yeah, just a quick question. That Brown Jarrett drain, does it run the full length right to Bear Creek, or is it only a partial little outlet?
It's only municipal drain downstream through the Rombout's property. So the main drain comes south, it crosses Confederation, it goes into the east limit of the Rombout's property, and it goes through the whole farm, and then crosses Confederation again to the north side of Confederation, and then it's only a very short distance from the road to the termination of the drain. So the municipal status, that particular channel appears to have been improved physically by man. It's been straightened and dug. It doesn't have municipal drain status.
Okay.
One of the issues that we've discussed with staff is potentially saying if there's beaver dams or if there's debris and brush that's causing, like, because that can have if there's a big blockage with debris dam, that can make the water fill up quite high. So if there's things that need to be done downstream of the municipal drain, or we've even had projects where, well, typically if we try to expand municipal drains downstream into natural water courses, the Department of Fishery and Oceans typically will have a concern with the quality of the habitat. So they say there's fish habitat there, and if by changing it from a nice meandering vegetated channel, and we're gonna make it more trapezoidal, straighter, less shade, a whole bunch of things, not as many meanders, they would have a concern with that. But one thing we've been able to do in certain circumstances where municipalities or landowners are asking us to is say, well, we'll write a report to incorporate the channel, not necessarily make big improvements to it, but it allows the municipality on behalf of those landowners to make sure there's no beaver dams in it, and make sure those debris dams, if they form, can be removed, and make sure it's flowing. So that's something, again, as part of that other investigation with the capacity, there gets to be a point of having discussions about how far downstream would you want to go with that part of it. So you can have two parts of it, improving locally closer to Watford, and further down potentially making sure that that part of it is addressed.
So if we did do that on the Brown Jarrett drain, that would go into the Municipal Drain Act? It wouldn't be a storm sewer like the other
Yeah,
one?
eventually, my take is you would want to do that through the act.
Okay.
You could try to go in other manners, but the act is fairly efficient as far as creating access for maintenance, distributing maintenance costs, getting approvals through the agencies, things like that. Not necessarily saying that the investigation at this point would need to be through the act. We could analyze it. Part of the investigation will require us to enter lands to take measurements, taking some cross sections of the channel every so often so that we can analyze the system. That will require physical access to the properties. And if you are downstream of the municipal drain, you don't necessarily have the legal right of entry. That's not to say that the municipality couldn't approach those particular landowners and get the permission and not necessarily have to do the pursue the Drainage Act just to get the information. You could do the study first if the landowners give you permission to enter, get that information, make some decisions, and then move forward after with the act if you feel it's necessary.
Thanks, man.
Okay, anybody else have any questions? Counselor Westgate?
It's not really a question. Thanks for the report. I thought it was a very good report. I like the idea of taking the water east. And taking some pressure off the drain to the south, or to the west. The Brown Creek's a much bigger system and I think it could handle the water easier. I like putting the curb along Centennial Ave, holding some water, retaining water there. And then I don't know whether we want to take the water to the south and take it between the high school and our parking lot. We have the roadway there right between the diamonds. Or could we take it down Confed or just off Confed? I think we should look at that too. Run all the water to the north and then to the east. But
To the east.
I really believe the water all has to go to Browns Creek that way. And then that takes a lot of the pressure off of McGregor Street if we can take all the water from Centennial Ave, from the ballparks, from our new complex in the arena, and maybe pick up like the factories on the east side of town and take it all to the east.
Well, it'll take the pressure off the Brown Jarrett drain
Right.
too, would it not?
Right.
Yes, I don't disagree with that. Like I said, we didn't initially include it in the report because of the potential of not being approved. Knowing the costs that are involved with the other alternatives and the fact that I do agree, if you could take the water away from that North Branch system, the North Branch system seems to have the most concerns. And if we can get the water entirely away, which is either alternative 3 or going east, which I'll say is alternative 4, those two options are alternatives. They completely remove the water. Now you will need to get, again, Conservation Authority, they will need to accept us taking the water in a different direction. I agree that that creek is bigger and the impact on that creek is a smaller percentage, but you would need for them to actually approve that. And I think if that's the direction that we get asked to go in, then that would be the first step, would be to say, okay, let's go to the Conservation Authority and have those discussions and hopefully get a positive response. That would be sort of the way to go if council decides that's the way to go.
Also taking it east, we don't have to cross Nauvoo with it. We don't have to go through like our business section along Confed there. And that's quite a few properties we'd have to disrupt. And going the other way, it would be less interruption for our constituents.
Yeah, the disruption part also, and the reason for the disruption is because the amount of effort that it takes to get there. I agree that the costs will show the result is that when you have to cross, say, the intersection of Nauvoo and Confederation, you're dealing with sanitary sewers, you're dealing with water mains, you're dealing with gas mains, you're dealing with fiber optic cables, hydropoles, all that stuff is in our way. Restoring asphalt, you're crossing intersections and you're going down roads, all that stuff goes up in cost. So it's a disturbance, plus it's more costly, and some of that comes out. Now, if you go the other way, if you go east, some of it is fairly deep. So you're digging a pretty big hole. So there's a lot of digging, but
once you get over the hill.
once you get over the hill, you're downhill. So I don't disagree.
Mike, following Jerry's idea here, the east, the price that we have, does that include the curbs then along Centennial Ave?
Yes, that would include starting at the junction of where the water enters Memorial Park. So that there's a 12-inch storm sewer that leaves Centennial and goes west through the park. So you'd start You would block it off completely. And then put a new manhole and change the direction with a new sewer heading south. Now, what happens is you're going quite flat. So from that Memorial Park, the new pipe that we've designed or priced to go would be to head south. You would have a new manhole and pick up the water coming out of the parking lot at the next spot and go down one more and turn and go basically through that north driveway beside the school and get out into the grassed area and go due east. Once you get to the ball diamonds, we would go south and then around the ball diamonds. And then once you get to the farmland, you're going southeast.
You're probably gonna go between the ball diamonds because we go south farther. Oh, sorry. If you go south farther, then you're not on our property anymore. We haven't got any room between the ball diamonds and the property owners to the south. So, but we do have room to take it between the ball diamonds, I believe.
Normally, I would say yes, but with the depths that we're talking, our excavation is gonna get quite deep. I wouldn't want to say for sure you could get between the ball diamonds. We could try. But we looked at going south and that area is undeveloped and cropped at this time. You could keep the pipe close to the property line, the very southerly limit. Whether you could stay on municipal property or not, you could look at. We didn't get too far into depth with everything. We were just trying to say, okay, physical construction cost and, you know, how big would our pipes be? How deep would our pipes be to come up with that cost estimate? So we can look at all those things as more of a fine-tuned, more detailed analysis.
I went out there and was looking at it yesterday, and that's why I was thinking go north and then through our parking
Yeah.
lot.
I think that, and I might not be 100% right, George, maybe you've looked at this with me enough that if we went north, I think you're talking about a much longer distance to go east. We were cutting southeast to get into the open channel earlier. So the whole length of the drain that we were looking at from the east side of from the west side of the ball diamond was about 965 meters. If we went to the north, I think we're probably more than double that.
If you went right behind the arena and cut. If you went right behind the arena and cut through the track area there and then went to the north of the first ball diamond of the Optimus ball diamond, then you could maybe go right through on our property there. Or,
Yeah, we could certainly look into that.
and head the same way.
Yeah, it's not, we could look into it. We were just trying, I think from what I recall, we were trying to find an outlet in an open channel sooner. The longer that drain becomes, the bigger the pipe has to be and the more costs we were dealing with. And so we were looking at just trying to get it to that open channel further south.
And the less flow you get, unless you make the pipe bigger.
Right. And just one further comment too. We were trying very much to minimize the amount of pipe in very deep cuts. So at some point you get over the hill and then installation gets a lot more economical and efficient. So with the route we chose, it kind of minimizes the amount of depth we do need. Unfortunately, there is a very deep sewer at the water tower there that drains the water tower infrastructure. So we have a fixed depth there that we have to continuously meet regardless of which route we take. So there's that consideration that we have to, still accommodate that depth there regardless of which route we take.
There's also the possibility of taking the pipe where it comes out of the north side of the water tower there and hooking it in through our property and hook it into the drain once you get over on the west or east side, just before the ball diamond.
Does anybody else have any questions? Counselor Morris, anybody on the other side before I go to Counselor Morris? Counselor Morris.
With the Jerry's idea again there, heading, the one idea is go through the ballpark and by the water tower and that. And the other option, I believe, was to head straight north to Confed, go by the ambulance station and down to Bear Creek. would you be able to have a difference in the cost of those two? I hate going through the ball diamonds. Like, no matter what time of year we're gonna have problems.
It wouldn't be a big deal to go through the ball diamonds, I don't think, because we're just gonna have to fence it off while they're doing it. The ball
Mhm.
diamonds won't be interrupted at all, just getting to them.
Street and everything will be.
Because we looked at going around the south limit of it, I can't say whether we would physically impact or be able to fit without. I know that we're cuts in excess of 4 meters. So to dig a open trench 4 meters deep does get wider on the top. All I can say is that we would certainly be able to look into that and provide more feedback if that's what the request is. If that's, if that's something that's appealing to the municipality, there's certainly an option that we can investigate.
Probably to the north of the arena. I think if you look at it and then cut back through, even if we have to disrupt our track for a little bit, would be the way to go.
Yeah, we can look in that direction as well. Those are two different somewhat alternative. We look at a fairly high level in terms of distance and slope and those sort of things. This made the most sense to us when we looked at it. That's not to say that you can't build something different.
The only problem with going around the south side of that ball diamond is we had a hell of a time to get the little bit of property that we got there from the owner back there, and the next time I think it might even be harder.
I guess just one comment too. I guess there's the alternative too of leaving that water tower infrastructure connected to the existing system. That's not contributing majorly to the flows, disconnecting everything else from that pipe and just leaving that system intact to service just that, and then diverting all the storm flows into separate, which may alleviate some of that depth concerns with the alternative of going to the north. So we'll look into that.
I'm pretty sure there was one catch basin tied into that line. I think it's a 6-inch line coming from the water tower there. It's just the overflow for the water tower. It doesn't take any water, groundwater, it's just the overflow. But I'm sure we did tie one catch basin into that at one time or other, if I remember right.
The records that we found show it to be a 12-inch drain, but you're right, it doesn't take outside water other than it's a overflow from the tower. There does look like to be there one catch basin that's attached. There is a separate drain on the school property that's parallel. They run side by side, so to speak, but enough far apart. One's in the school property, and there are catch basins back there, but they go to that drain. They both end up coming down on Centennial, and they both connect into that same pipe that's along Centennial right now.
Okay, anybody else have any questions? As we know, everything's interconnected. We just can't look at rural and not consider urban or vice versa. So Deputy Mayor Kellenberg.
Not really a question. I kind of like Jerry's ideas. It will alleviate the water on the other end, on the other side of town where we've had a few problems there as well. So.
All right, thank you. Anybody else have any questions or comments for today? Seeing none, and as I said, the public will have an opportunity to ask questions and be involved with the process as well, shortly into the new year. So thank you very much, gentlemen, for putting the report together. I think we've given you more work than we gave you to start with. But we'll be in touch to talk to you about different options, and thank you very much for coming, and Merry Christmas to both of you. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you. Okay, council, we're gonna go to number 7 if we could. There's been a small change on the agenda. 7A will now become a 7B, and 7A now will become a verbal update from our CAO, Ron Van Horn. Mr. Van Horn.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've had, as council's aware, the contract with respect to the EOC has expired or will expire at the end of this year. So we've been looking for a candidate or candidates who can take over the work on behalf of the municipality. We've had some success in that regard. We have spoken with Mr. Jim Hart, who is prepared to come back to the county or the township, I should say, as the EOC director. And we've also spoken with Jay Van Lincoln, who is prepared to also come back in the alternate role for Mr. Hart. So both of those people are very respected in their own fields. They have lots of experience. For those who haven't been around that long, Jay Van Lincoln's been the alternative for many years, and he's done that both for us here in Warwick, and he's done it for a number of other communities as well. So both the people are very talented, and they're quite reasonable in terms of costs and expenses to what we would incur. So we would recommend strongly that both of them be appointed deputy and deputy assistant deputy or whatever at the end of the day. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Van Horn. I think because we're getting close to the end of the calendar year, a motion would be the way to do this, and we can do it by bylaw later on, but just to make it official. So I would ask if council would consider a motion to make Mr. Hart the manager, and then the assistant manager to that process would be Jay Van Lincoln if council saw fit. Councillor Manning is making that motion. Deputy Mayor Kallenberg is seconding that. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much. The next piece of business we have today is we're doing a tour of municipal assets. So we're going to get right to that once this meeting concludes. I will ask, there is no closed meeting session today. I will ask the clerk about bylaws. Please, Madam Clerk.
That bylaw 101 of 2024 be read a first, second, third time and finally passed.
Do we have a mover? Moved by Deputy Mayor Kallenberg, seconded by Councillor Morris. All in favor? That's carried. And adjournment. Deputy Mayor Kallenberg is seconded by, let's see, Councillor Westgate. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you.